We'll start with the next chapter. Athato vraṇapraśnādhyāyaḥ व्याख्यास्यामः यथोवाच भगवान् धन्वन्तरिः. Now, vraṇapraśnādhyāyaḥ. Now, Sushruta has used that word vrana in different meanings. It's not only about the wound. In the majority of the situations, it's about the wound. In many other contexts, Sushruta has used the word vrana as a common word for any disease even. And in this chapter, throughout, you come across the description of the doshas and the disease formation, and very little about the wound as such. So, this fact has to be kept in mind. Like Sushruta has used that word vrana in a different meaning many times also. Now, Vata-pitta Shleshmana eva deha sambhava hetavah taireva avyapannaihi adho madhya urdhva sannivistaihi shariram idam dharyate agaramiva स्थूणाभिः तिस्रभिः अतश्च त्रिस्थूणम् आहुः एके तयेव व्यापन्नाः प्रलयहेतवः तदेभिरेव षोडशचतुर्थैः सम्भवस्थितिप्रलयेषु अपि अविरहितं शरीरं भवति. Now, the doshas, we have already discussed about the Vata Pitta Kapha doshas. Sushruta now again stresses upon the point, the whole body is dependent upon the three doshas, and as long as they are functioning normally, the body would be maintained, the integrity of the body is maintained, and this is compared to a tripod, a stand with the three legs, like, and hence the body also is named as a Tristhuna, where you will have tripod-like appearance or tripod-like functioning. As long as they are functioning normally, the body is all that homeostatic principles will be maintained properly. But whenever there is a variation, then it could result in the disease as well as the death. Now, there is another of the issue. Sushruta has considered Shonita or Rakta also as a dosha, but that priority, the three doshas, of course, that theory is there, but that Rakta being considered as a fourth dosha is a unique contribution of Sushruta. The reasons for that is, now the word difference between dosha and the doshya or the dhatu is, dosha can vitiate, whereas dosha gets vitiated. Now, as far as the Rakta is concerned, according to Sushruta, Rakta is the one which carries the substances throughout, and hence it also can vitiate the others, and you will have a group of diseases called as the Raktaja Vyadhi. Moreover, for all the doshas, there is a specific Shodhana Chikitsa, like Vata, Basti and Vamana, Virechana for the other doshas. Similarly, Rakta Mokshana also is another of the specific remedy, and hence Rakta is also considered as a dosha according to Sushruta. Now, and this is a unique contribution, a Pratitantra Siddhanta of Sushruta, like Rakta is a fourth dosha, whereas the other texts may not accept that in the same manner. Now, Narte Deha Kafadasti Navitta Nabhavata Shonitapi Banityam Dehe is Dharyate. Without Kapha, Pitta or Vata, as well as Rakta, body cannot be maintained. So you will have a situation of all the doshas together. And that integral functions, interrelated functions of these doshas is a important thing as such. This represents all the different levels of the functioning, which we will be studying later on. तत्र वा गतिगन्धनयोः इति धातुः तपसन्तापे श्लिष आलिङ्गने एतेषां कृद्विधिः प्रत्ययैः वातः पित्तः श्लेष्मा इति रूपाणि भवन्ति. The Sanskrit origin, etymology of this word is va dhatu represents gati and gandha, the movement and the smell sensation, carrying of the smell, and hence the word dhatu, vata is produced by adding the pratyaya, krit pratyaya to vag dhatu. Similarly, tapasantape, the word tapa suggests for santapa, increasing the temperature or heating. Now, that itself would be converted into pitta. Shlisha alingane, shlisha is to hold the body together, hold the structures together, and hence shleshma. So, this is the etymology of these vata pitta shleshma words in Sanskrit language. Doshasthana yata urdhvam mokshyamah tatra samasena vatah shroni buddha samshayah tadupari adho nabhehe pakvashayah pakvasha amashaya madhyatsam pittasya amashayah shleshmanah. So there is a sequential, the lowest portion of the body, that's the shroni buddha, pelvic cavity, is the location of vata. Then in the middle portion you have the pitta, around Nabhi, that's the middle portion of the abdomen, upper portion of the thorax, and the upper portion of the abdomen, Amashya. These are considered as the sthana of the kapha. This is in a gross way. In a gross way, the sthanas of Vata Pitta Kapha are mentioned. But there are still more details when you go into the further details. Now, when it comes to the question of Vata and the Shroni Buddha, the colon and the pelvic cavity, there is always a confusion. Most of the times, people equate Vata to neurological symptom or neurological system, and the that idea, concept of or something like a relationship between the gut and the brain. This is a very new concept in the contemporary science. Till very recently, this idea was not there. But in the last few years, in the last 5 years rather, the there is a lot of information coming up of the relations between the gut and the brain. Now, this is what from one of the reference article. Over 90% of the more than 4,000 articles on gut-brain axis were published in the last 5 years. In the last 5 years, almost more than 4,000 articles have been published in PubMed. PubMed is one of the major source of the publication from the contemporary science point of view. Various aspects of the relations between the gut and the brain, they are coming up, but practical usage of this information in the treatment, still it is in the primitive state. At present, this is limited only to some conditions related to the motility of the intestines, but the relationship between or regulation of the functions of the neurological functions of the body, I am not saying only about the brain, the neurological functions of the body, by administering some medication into the gut, something like a basti, that kind of an idea still is not there in the contemporary science. Whereas basti being one of the major remedy for the vata, and hence regulating the functions regulating controlling the disorders related to the neurological system of different varieties. I am not saying only the neurological system. The diseases where the regulation or homeostatic mechanism of the body are affected by administering basti. This is a very old concept of Ayurveda and well established. And basti chikitsardha. Basti is one of the major method of treatment, and hence that idea of basti or the therapy of basti I will consider as the therapy of the future. So in future, you will have maybe in future when the theory of this gut-brain axis and more study comes up, and there is a more of evolution of this theory, you may come back to the past where the basti treatment may become a mainstream treatment even. So, as an Ayurvedic point, from Ayurvedic point of view, it's our responsibility to maintain or keep up that tradition of the basti and continue to make use of that clinically. Just to give some examples, I have to some of the very significant examples of such these articles. Those who are interested, they may refer to these articles. I have collected only a few of that articles, which I have considered as quite significant and give a totally new outlook to the contemporary science. And these are the different publications. Those who are interested, they may go through these publications and articles, which give you a sort of perception of the possible future of the contemporary medicine, where the idea of the basti may become validated by the contemporary science. When I say this, I am not saying that there is a need to validate from the contemporary science point of view, and it's not our responsibility, but our responsibility is to ensure and show that there is a possibility of clinical results showing in the patients, which we are demonstrating in many of the patients where basti is seen to be useful in many disease conditions. Then at the same point, another issue is many of our research articles published on related to basti, they are looking at only the local issues, this absorption and the mechanisms changes in the intestinal flora and so on. I think that kind of an approach is not necessary. We need to change to the evolving outlook or the coming up idea of the impact of that neurological and that brain axis, and try to maybe if at all possible, try to come up with such information how Basti can produce the change, and there is always a possibility, and that's why I have listed those articles. So those who are interested in such activities, they may go through these articles and prepare a protocol for the study. Athaparam Panchada Vibhajyate. These doshas are categorized into 5 depending upon the variation of the functions. These are not 5 categories. Rather, these 5 would represent the different forms of the functions of the same. Is something like this. The same electricity, when it flows through the fan, it rotates and gives out the wind. And when it flows through a stove, it heats up. When it flows through a other instrument, it can produce a kinetic energy. So on and so forth. Similarly, the doshas in different areas of the body may produce different sorts of the function. It's not that the doshas are different. Pranavata and apanavata are not different. They are the same. It's the same vata. When it presents with a set of organs, it produces different sort of the functions. As I have given the example of electricity going through different sorts of the instruments as such, and where the functions would be different. So similar, this is the basic idea of that pancha variety, 5 varieties of the individual doshas. Tatra vatasya vatavyadho kshamaham. The types of vata and their functions, there are described in Vata chapter later on. Then in the present chapter, the description is limited to Pitta and Kapha, because Vata and the description of Vata is referred in the other text, later chapters as such. Pittasya yakripihanahu hridayam dristihi tvaka purvoktam cha shleshmanaha urashira kantha jikhva moolam sandaheti purvoktam cha etani kal doshanam sthanani avyapananam. Now, the location of the Pitta and Kapha in the previous context is limited only to the middle abdomen and upper part of the thorax, or upper part of the abdomen. I say again, costa, upper part of the costa again. The costa word includes both abdomen and thorax. So, to translate costa as abdomen again is not very perfect. So, upper part of the costa is limited to the shleshma. Middle part is about the pitta. That's what's mentioned in the previous talk. Now, there is a bit more detail. In the middle part again, yakrat pliha, no? Yakrat pliha, the liver and the spleen, hridayam, the heart. In addition to this upper part of the costa, drishti tvakacha, vision and the skin. These are the other major locations of the pitta when it comes to those 5 varieties. Shleshmanaha urashirak kandaha yuha moolam sandhayancha sandhayati purvoktancha. In the kapha, it's the chest, the skull, the head, neck, and the tongue or joints. These are the other locations of the kapha, in addition to what's mentioned in the previous shloka. Visargo dana vikshepehi somasuryanila yatha dharayanti jagadeham kapha pitta nilasthatha. The functions of this kapha pitta vata, they are compared to what we see in the nature. In the nature, the main 3 components of maintenance of the nature would be, one is the rain, the humidity which is added to the world, and then the same would be evaporated. There will be recycling of the fluid, and then there is a movement by the air which keeps that humidity up and down, so that there is a scope for regeneration of the flora, the plants, or maybe everyday life depends upon this recycling of the water and water contents, humidity, and then the whole process sets in. And these are attributed to the functions of the Surya, the sun, the air, by the air as such. Then, according to Indian science, this lunar, the moon is the one who regulates the rain or the cold as such. So there is 2 components, cold and the heat component. Now, as far as what we know about this impact of these celestial bodies, as far as the sun giving the heat, air producing the motility, no confusion. But as far as the lunar effect, the moon producing the cold effect over the environment, This is not fully understood by the contemporary science, but because it is not studied by the contemporary science, you cannot deny that. So there is a component of that sort. And compared to that, the doshas are functioning in the body where you will have a component of heat generation, a component of the cooling down, and then a component which helps in the motility. And these three components together maintain the normal functions of the body. तत्र जिज्ञास्यं किं पित्तव्यतिरेकात् अन्यो अग्निः आहोस्वित् पित्तमेव अग्निः इति अत्र उच्यते न खलु पित्तव्यतिरेकात् अन्यो अग्निः उपलभ्यते आग्नेयत्वात् पित्ते दहनपाचनादिषु अभिप्रवर्तमाने अग्निवदुपचारः क्रियते अन्तरग्निः इति क्षीणैः अग्निगुणे तत्समानद्रव्योपयोगात् अतिवृद्धे शीतक्रियोपयोगात् आगमाच्च पश्यामो न खलु पित्तव्यतिरेकात् अन्यो अग्निः इति. Now, during this period, during this discussion, there was some question probably related to the difference between the Agni and Pitta. Now, in many of the other texts, it's mentioned as if the Agni and Pitta are different. The Agni is a metabolic energy which converts or helps in conversion of a substance to other. And based upon that, you have the Kosthagni, where the food is converted to an assimilable form. Then the Dhatu Agni, where the changes from one Dhatu to the other, and then the Bhuta Agni, where the elements of the universe, which we have discussed about earlier, the Panchamahabhutas, they are again recycled into the biological components of the body, and this kind of a perception of the reactions are presented in case of the description of the Agni. Pitta also has a similar function. But then there was a confusion, like Pitta and Agni are different or same. There are two different views. Some people say that Pitta and Agni are different, but Sushruta accepts that Pitta and Agni are not different. They are the same. So without Pitta, Agni cannot be seen. Pitta is the visible and identifiable presentation of the Agni. Agni otherwise is subtle, and it's only the functions which is represented. So it's just like a method of description, a change as such. Like now to say that when you cook the food rice, the rice gets converted into your food anna. Now that change of conversion of a raw rice to the cooked rice is the function of the Agni. But the fuel which you have given is the Pitta. But there is not much of a difference. Without that fuel, you cannot expect that process to occur. So that, you may find out, somebody may say that process of conversion of raw rice to the cooked rice is equivalent to what the heat which you have given. So it's just a question of how the things are presented. But primarily, there is not much of a difference. And this is what Sushruta says, like this difference has to be perceived. And the proof to say that Shita Kriya Upayogata, when there is a aggravation of the Agni with the Shita Kriya, application of the cold or administering Shita Vijatavya, that Agni Vriddhi can be controlled. At the same time, Pitta Vriddhi also can be controlled. Agamacha, as per the textual description, Pashyamona Kharu Pitta Vetereka Anyagni. And hence, for all practical purposes, you can consider Agni as well as Pitta as the same. In Vagbhata, there was a bit of compromising issue. Vagbhata has mentioned the Pachaka Pitta as Tektadrautum Pakadi Karmana Anarashabdidam. The same Pitta, when it's present in the liquid form, is called as Pitta. But when suppose that liquid form is not seen, that material form is not seen, but only the function is suggested, then it's considered as Agni. This is a bit of compromise of description in Ashtanga. Again, it's all about the verbal expression. Perception is the same, theory is same, there is no difference of opinion. The theory is the same, there is no difference in that. But it's only about how the things are described. The selection of the words are slightly different. Now, the Pachakagni, according to Vagbhata, is the same, the power of digestion, which helps in digestion of the food in the stomach, and that separation of the residue and the nourishing component. The formation of the kain is the function of the Pachakagni. Now, Tatya Adrusahitakena Visheshana Pakvamashay Madhyastam Pittam Chaturvidham Annapanam Pachati Vivechetija Dosha Rasamutra Purushani Tatrastameva Atmashaktya Sheshanam Pittasthananam Sharirasya Ja Agnikarmana Anugraham Karoti. In the Pakwash Amashay Madhyasta area, in between, now I won't completely say that Amashay is the stomach and Pakwash is the intestines. To attribute that way is not very perfect, but to a gross extent it is true. The area where the digestion and absorption occurs, that's the Pakwasha. Amasha is the area where the digestion is not yet complete and it continues. As far as from the contemporary physiology point of view, the digestion process starts in the mouth itself, and to a certain extent, the absorption also starts in the mouth itself. The absorption and digestion process continues up to the stomach, but the intensity of the digestion, breaking down of the substances into the smaller molecules, would be almost complete by the end of the stomach. Beyond that, stomach intestines, still that kind of a process continues, but the extent of that would be reduced. And in the intestines, from the intestine onwards, or maybe duodenum onwards, the absorption component would be more. Hence, for practical purposes, we can consider the structures beyond stomach as the Pakwasha, and the structures earlier to the pylorus end can be as the Amashaya assets. Pakwasha and Amashaya, this kind of differentiation is possible to a great extent, but it's not very rigid kind of translation. Now, Chaturvidham Annapanam Pachati, the Annapana, the food which you have taken, may be in any physical form. It could be a solid, it could be a semi-solid, it could be a liquid, or as such. So, that's Ashitam, Khaditam, Pitam, Leedham. The four varieties of these physical forms of the substances are something which is chewed, or something which is just swallowed, or which is something which is taken in the form of liquid, drunk as such, or something which is liquid as such, the leader. Now, this kind of different physical form is converted into a uniform liquid substance, that's chyme, and this is a major function of the stomach. A isoosmolar liquid substance formed after consumption of any physical form of the food, which involves mechanical grinding as well as addition of the liquid as well as the dissolving substances like hydrochloric acid as well as the different enzymes, protease to break down the protein and so on. And this is the function of the stomach. Then the next part is, once that chyme is formed, the next part is the Vivechetya Dosha Rasa Mutra Purishani. The substances would be either absorbed or they will be changed, metabolized. Chemical contents can be altered, and after that absorption, the substance reaches to the target area of the body, and this there at the target area, at the tissue level, either it's converted into energy or the substance may be converted into the bodybuilding, like the structure component, the lipoproteins adding to the cell membrane and so on. So either it could be converted into energy like the pitta or maybe the kapha, or it may be just maintaining the environment, the homeostasis, like the electrolyte acid, or there could be some residual substances, excretory substances, which are left out. So this component of a substance decisive separation of a absorbable and non-absorbable substance also is a function of the pitta, pachaka pitta, and this by this function it helps in maintenance of all the other areas of the pitta throughout the body, as well as maintenance of the nourishment of the body is a major function of the pachaka pitta. It's absolutely perfect description of the functions of the whole structures related to the gastrointestinal tract, where I won't say it's only the stomach and intestines. You have a very complex process of this, where the food is taken in and it is converted into chyme, and it is basically divided into the components like glucose and proteins and fat. Primarily, this is about the very minimal description of the digestive process as described in the contemporary science. That glucose is again converted into energy by the Krebs cycle, ADP, ATP, and that energy is utilized for all the functions of the body. That's the Pitta-sthana anugraha. The anugraha of the body is maintained by this. And the proteins, they can be used for further synthesis of the protein, and it can be used for the formation of the different structures. Suppose if there is no food intake, the food intake is not proper, then the protein from the muscle again can be converted into amino acids, and hence it can be utilized. This also is a function of the same, or maintenance of a balance of the content is same. Similarly, the triglycerides, the fat substances, they are either used for the storage or they again can be recycled. So this function is the function of Pachakapitta. So I won't, when I say Pachakapitta, I don't limit only to the stomach and intestines. It's the whole integral process of the digestion and absorption and proper planning of the utilization of the substances. That's the Pachakapitta. यत् यकृत्प्लीह प्लीनोः पित्तं तस्मिन् रञ्जको अग्निः इति संज्ञा स रसस्य रागकृदुक्तः उक्तः. The pitta component which is present in or which is located, which can be located to the yakut and pliha, it helps in maintenance of the quality of the rakta, and adding to that ranjaka, that's the reddish component. Reddish component is hemoglobin, which helps in the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. So it helps in maintenance of that oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. Now there are two issues. One, the oxygen provided, that's the function of the lungs, and carrying capacity is that of the hemoglobin. Now building of that carrying capacity is a function of the yakut and pliha. Yat pittam hridayastam tasmin sadhako agnihi iti samjna. A pitta component which is present in the hridaya is considered as sadhaka agni. So abhiprarthita mano artha sadhanakaduktaha, it helps in executing whatever is the intention. Now I will deal with these issues with more detail later on, like see how that whole activity can be presented. Suppose if you say that abhiprartha artha sadhana, there are two major components. One is you need to have a stimulus to have a desire. So that's one part. And then there has to be a desire about certain thing. Like you need to have a stimulus to hear the classes. Then you need to have a source for getting the class information. Then you need to have certain activity to execute that. You have to approach your teacher and then plan for the timing management and so on. Now, mainly there are three components. One is the primary wish, which has to be generated. This is possible as function of the Atma. Ichha, Dvesha, Sukham, Dukham. That's the function of the Atma. Then the next part is develop a desire and then reach out to the source where you have. That's the manas, the functions of the manas. But when it is a question of execution, when you sit in the classroom and hear the classes, there would be you need to receive that. You should have capacity and capacity to receive that. Your physical condition should be maintained. That kind of an activity of the maintenance of the physical activity is the function of the sadhaka pitta. So it's not the primary two. The primary two levels of intention, they are at a level of atma and manas. But when it's a question of that brass tacks or the real functions, maintaining the hard issues related, hardcore issues of the activity, then that is the function of the sadhaka pitta. So if you do not feel sleepy in the classroom, if you are maintaining the attention, utilizing your energy to whatever you have heard in the class as well as understood the class, that's due to the sadhaka pitta which is present over there. And that sadhaka pitta location is supposed to be in the hridaya, in the heart. Now that's another of the issue. I'll try to deal with that a bit, somewhat more detail later on. Yadrustyam pittam tasmin alotaka agnihi iti samjna. The pitta which is located in the eyes is the alotaka agni. Sarupagrahana adhikratah yattu tvati pittam tasmin bhrajako agnihi iti samjna. The pitta which is in the pak, skin is considered as a bhrajako agni. So abhyanga parisheka avaga halepanadinam kriya dravyanam patta chayanam cha prakashakah. The bhrajaka pitta present in the subcutaneous or the Puck area. Again, when I say puck, I don't translate puck as skin. So the surface of the body, and which helps in absorption of whatever you have applied over the surface of the body, abhyanga parisheka avagaha, etc. And adding to the metabolic components of the body by from these areas, as well as maintaining of a uniform consistency of the skin or the appearance. That's the Dhajaka Pitta. Now, to again go into somewhat, again, I'm not saying that we can understand these only with the contemporary science, but there are certain issues which you have to be aware of. At times there could be some confusion when the functions are studied from the contemporary science point of view. So from that point of view, I will be comparing, trying to compare the functions of these different varieties of the pitta into whatever you see in the contemporary science. As far as the Pathika Pitta is concerned, we had that certain discussion with a different context where it's not only related to the stomach, the whole function of the digestion process is the Pathika Pitta. Now, this Ranjaka Pitta, usually in majority of the people would say that hemoglobin is produced from, or these RBCs are produced from the bone marrow, and the role of liver and spleen is not really not given much value in the hemopoiesis. So some confusion, and some people say that the hemopoiesis, the production of the RBCs, is mainly from the liver and the spleen in pediatric life, in intraembryonic, intrauterine life, as well as in pediatric life. Later on, it shifts the bone marrow. Okay, fine, that's also true. But in addition to that, in the normal maintenance of the qualities of the blood, or normal maintenance of the functions of the blood, you have a major role of the liver and the spleen. The liver and the spleen add to the maintenance of a healthy RBCs. Spleen is the one where the RBCs are destroyed once they become hypermature. Their functions, they are destroyed, and hence it gives scope for new RBCs to come in. Liver produces all the enzymes which are necessary for that conversion. So I would attribute that kind of a functional biochemical reaction component to the Ranjaka Pitta. Now this has some relevance when it comes to the question of understanding the disease and symptoms too. I will try to give some examples later on. Now similarly, Buddhi Medhabhimanadhihi Apipretartha Sadharartha Sadhakam Hridgatam Pittam. Now these shlokas I have quoted from Bhagavata, which give the same intention as that of Sushruta, but the only difference is the words selected by Bhagavata are somewhat more easy to memorize. Sushruta, of course, is true, but is an issue. Now, the controversy is whether the emotions are located in the heart or the brain. Again, issue of controversy. As per the contemporary science, all the emotions or all that your intentions, they are the functions of the brain, and it's not having anything to deal with the heart. Whereas we, from Ayurvedic point of view, all the emotions and all that regulation of the activities is attributed to the Hridaya. Now, whether the Hridaya is the brain, we'll not go into that controversy. But Hridaya, the location of the Hridaya, there is no controversy. The Hridaya is located in the thorax area, and the functions are mentioned very clearly. And the functions of the brain are described very little, very insignificantly in Ayurvedic texts compared to what you see in the neurology of the present day situation. Brain and brain functions are described very minimally in the Ayurvedic text. So there is always a controversy like whether you believe or you are correct to say that heart is the location or not. Now, from the practical point of view, even in the contemporary literature, anywhere throughout the globe, when you welcome somebody, whether you welcome somebody heartily welcome or daily welcome, whenever you say identity of yourself, myself, whether you touch the heart or whether you touch the brain. So throughout the globe, every human being has a natural instinct to say that whenever there is an issue of emotions and practicality, you refer to the heart than really the brain. But neurology, it says, and then of course you have all that biochemical functions of the emotions of the brain and so on. I'm not denying that part. But basically, brain is a structure which doesn't perceive of itself. The one organ which doesn't have a sensation in the body is the brain, which is supposed to be regulating the sensation of the whole body. So that's the intrinsic issue. And all that, whenever there is a execution of the functions, the the functions are executed through all that emotional as well as the physical activity of the functions are attributed to or executed through the major source, the HPA axis, with the pituitary and thyroid, and then adrenocortical this axis. So hypothalamus, pituitary, and the adrenal HPA axis, and that HPA axis it produces the glucocorticoids. That's the one which helps in maintenance of all that physical functions, and ultimately it results in that. So brain is something which is done in the green room, and whatever you see in the stage is the functions of the other organs of the body. HPA axis is the mediator between that green room to the stage. So whatever the action you see in the stage is mainly the functions of the heart. So whenever you have a strong emotion, you feel your heart rate being increased or altered, you feel the palpitation, uh, and you may have a flushing. The face may have a increased blood flow and so on. So whatever you see or whatever you appreciate of the changes in the body is mainly regulated by that HPA axis. The changes which occur in the brain, they are not felt as such. I am not denying that the changes do not occur. So hence, to perceive the heart as the major center of the emotions is practically correct. At the same time, I am not denying the other part. Giving the value to the brain and its functions also is valid. But when it comes to the question of practicality, what you see, the emotions being attributed to the heart is absolutely justified, and hence the variations of whatever you see as the emotions, they are seen as the functions of the different organs of the body. Your heart may have a palpitation, face may have a flushing, hands may have fine tremors when you are having a very strong emotion, and so on. So the changes which occur in the periphery, and from Ayurvedic point of view, those changes are given more importance, or rather, somewhat, I don't say more importance, rather, they are the measures of your emotions, visible forms of the emotions, and hence they are considered more valuable than those unseen issues. That's about the one. Then the Alochaka Pitta, again, I think those who have studied physiology, they very well know. When you see there is a chemical reaction occurring in the retina of changing of the substance rhodopsin into an activated rhodopsin or a bromidopsin, and this function is due to the light. So it's a sort of biochemical reaction. So whenever you see there is a biochemical reaction, and when we say the pitta represents the different varieties of biochemical reaction, it's absolutely correct. So from the contemporary science point of view, that kind of retinal perception of the eyes can be considered as the alochaka pitta. In the skin, again, skin is very metabolically active organ. We know about all that metabolical activity, and often it's also said that the skin is the outer brain because of very huge varieties of the functions of the skin, and the two major functions are the hemostasis and protection of, and then regulation of the internal factors are one of the very major functions of the skin, in addition to having a mechanical protection. And this kind of a function of homeostasis, where the absorption from the skin and its regulation, which again we have discussed to a certain extent in the earlier context of when we discussed about the labor, we have discussed certain of those issues, how the skin acts as an absorptive organ and how it is regulated. Now, this kind of an activity can be considered as the Bhrajaka Pitta as such. Now, the Pitta in the visible form, now these are all the functional aspects. A visible formation of the Pitta would be something related to the bile, and the, the qualities of that is mentioned as Pittam, Tikshnam, Dravam, Puti, Neelam, Pitam, Tathevacha, Ushnam, Katurasam, Teva, Vidadham, Amlamevacha. The qualities of the visible formation of the visible presentation of the Pitta are, it could be liquid, it may have Neela Pita Varna, either bluish or yellowish color, and it may have a pungent smell and Katurasa pungent taste also. Now, similarly, the Atavurdam Sutrasthana Anubhyakhyasyamaha. The next is about the Sutrasthana. Amashaya Pittashaya Uparishtato Tatratenikotvad Urdhudati Tejasaha Chandra iva Adityasya Chaturudhasya Aharasya Adharaha Saja Tatra Udakai Gunehi Aharaha Pratilinaha Bhinasangataha Sukhajaro Bhavati. The one Amashaya is a major reception of the food area where the food is collected, and the collected food is converted into a liquid form, digestible form, pratilinaha, bhinasangataha, and it helps in the easy digestion. At the same time, it also acts as adhara of the food. Now, adhara of the food in the sense, see, the basic issue is you need energy throughout as such, irrespective of whether you are eating or not. And that continuous provision of the energy is requires that nourishment, glucose. But you will not eat continuously. You will be eating only thrice or 4 times or maybe once in an hour, depending upon your convenience. But you are not continuously eating. Now, that food eaten at longer intervals, they are to be buffered, and they have to be converted into a continuous flow of energy. And this is a very complex process. The food which we have eaten thrice in a day has to be converted into a continuous 24 hours flow of energy. And this is a very complex process of this buffering mechanism. And among this process, it's a long process, the major component of that buffering is done in the gastrointestinal tract as a whole. Stomach as well as intestines, they act as a buffer. The food which you have taken in is a prolonged, that absorption time is prolonged up to about 4 to 5 hours, so that there is a continuous absorption, and then of course there is a continuous sequence of such actions which keep that energy for continuously 24 hours, or maybe some energy is stored and it can be utilized for the backlog. So this mechanism of maintenance of that nourishment is a complex process of the physiology, and the major portion that is done by the gastrointestinal tract, that's the major functions of the kapha. Madhuryata Pichiratvacha Pratiladitvata Pratyavata Amashaya Sambhavati Shleshma Madhurashitalaha. Amashaya is considered as the major source of such a function of the maintenance of the regulation. Tatrastha yavat swashaktya sheshanam shleshmasthananam sharirasya cha udakakarmana anugraham karoti. Urastha trikasandharanam atmavirena annarasa sahitena hridayavalambanam karoti. The avalambaka kapha is located in the ura, chest asset, and hence by that it helps in maintenance of the nourishment of throughout the body. Jihva mulakantasah jihvendriyasya saumyatvada samyak rasajnane vartate. In the jihva, it helps in perception of a proper taste as such. Shirastaha sneha santarpanata. In the shirasa, it helps in maintenance of the nourishment of the body and smooth functioning of all the indriyas, sensory organs of the body. Sneha santarpana adhikratatvata indriyanam atmagiriyana anugraham karoti. The sensory organs, they do their specific functions because of the regulation of the shirasta kapha, tarpaka kapha. Sandhistha shleshma sarvasandhi samsleshata sarvasandhi anugraham karoti. The kapha located in the sandhi joints helps in maintenance of the lubrication and nourishment of the joints as such. Bhavati jatra shleshma shvetaha guruhu snigdaha pichilaha shitayavata madhurastha vidagdasyat vidagdaha lavanasmutaha. These shleshma can be considered, the visible form of the kapha can be considered as mucinous secretions of the body. Mucinous secretions are slimy and they are relatively whitish in color, and it could be presented in every part of the body. So translating kapha as a phlegm is not justified. I would say it's the mucinous secretions which are present in all the mucous membrane of the body as such. Now, something more about this. When you say urasaha, the kapha which is present in the chest area, again it's a very complex mechanism of what we consider as the axis, HVA axis, but it results in See, HB axis, what we have discussed about the functions of the pitta. Now, there again you have all, we will come to that part again. Pranavata, which regulates the functions of the chitta, your intentions. Pitta does that mechanic function of stimulating the peripheral organs. Now, once the heart is stimulated, it increases the circulation to the peripheral area, and you will have that complex mechanisms which are there. Whenever there is an emotional disturbance, it helps in a strong emotion. It helps in maintenance of the arterial stretch, the pressure. The adrenal glands are stimulated, aldosterone it acts in and is secreted in, and it maintains of the circulation of the blood. Then kidneys, they will help in maintenance of the fluid and electrolyte, and this heart stimulates that kidney also. So this way you have a complex mechanism, and this complex mechanism is executed by the dynamism of the heart, and hence that kind of an integral function is a avalambaka kapha. It's not only what you can see in your heart and mechanism as it. Now, Kledaka kapha is virtually the functions of the stomach which convert that solid substance into a uniform liquid, and it involves that different types of the movement of the food. The movements in the stomach, you will have three varieties of the movement: propulsive movement, mixing movement, and then the gurgling movements as such. Now, and as well as there is a addition of the liquid, the enzymes, and this process of conversion of a solid food into a food which has a isoosmolarity is the function of the Kledaka kapha. So that's how it has to be understood. Rasapodanath Bodhaka Rasana Sthai, the Rasana Sthai, the papillae which are present in the, or the taste buds present in the tongue, they are located at different areas, and we know that they are based upon their location. You will be appreciating the different basic tastes of bitter, sour, and sweet. And it's a biochemical reaction. So the food which reaches to this papillae, and it undergoes a chemical reaction, and then the sensory cells are stimulated. That's how the taste is appreciated. So that's the function of the kapha. And from the contemporary science point of view, very little is understood about the perception of the taste. We now know that there are certain areas where the taste buds are having a specific property of perceiving the taste as it. But why a patient with a fever would have a bitter taste or at times sweet taste and so on? Again, there is a lot of confusion about that from the contemporary point of view. There are many theories. Certain of the theories, they say that the proportion of these microvilli that alters, direction alters, if all that moves towards the base, and hence bitter taste is appreciated. Some say that it is due to the IL-1, one of the tissue amines which is responsible. Some attribute it to the microorganism. But there is no such definite description of why that taste perception changes when you are ill due to some other diseases. From Ayurvedic point of view, that taste perception at the same time of disease would be one of the mirror of involvement of the doshas. So when you have vata, you will have a bitter taste. When you have kapha, you will have the sweet taste. When there is a pitta, there will be a sour taste. And based upon that, you diagnose the disease based upon dosha. So this is another of a unique idea of Ayurveda, and which helps in identification of diseases. Then Tarpaka kapha is the area of the brain which perceives these sensations. You have now different zones in the brain which are identified, located, which help in perception of these different sensations. That's what I say as the Tarpaka kapha. Then Sandhisam Shleshaka kapha is obviously the synovial fluid which helps in maintenance of the nourishment of the cartilages and the reduction of the friction, helps in movement of the body. Then Shonitasya sthanam ekrihanam tacha pranavihitam. The Rakta sthana is the Shonita, this Ekrit and Pliha, which is already mentioned, and from there it helps in maintenance of the remaining parts of the body. Anusnashitam madhuram snigdam raktam javarnatah Shonitam guru vistram syar vidahasya pittavata. It has many qualities of the pitta, and it is attributed. Now, to again clarification about these doshas and the functions, I will try to give one example, like a process of vision. You are looking at an object. How these different components come in. To have a vision, you have to be alive, and there has to be an intention to see, and your manas and the indriya have to be having that connection. Atmindriya Manorthanam Sanikarsha. So pratyaksha of vision has to be started. Once that process of the pratyaksha vision in the subtle area has started, pranavayu would give you the further intellectual capacity to look at the object. Now you need to decide what should be seen and what should not be seen. The alotika pitta, it helps in that chemical reaction. So, and that what you see in the retina, the changes in the retina when you look at the object. Tarpaka kapha is the perception, the area of the perception. Now, when you see a patient where the vision is not seen, it could be of different categories. A person who is unconscious may not see, so Atmindriya Manortha Sanikarsha doesn't occur. A person who has some abnormality of the brain and the neurological structures reaching up to the retina, the pranavayu vikriti. If the patient has a retinal abnormality in the retina, hence he is not able to see, that's the alotika pitta variety. If the person has an abnormal damage to the brain tissue, the area of perception, the sensory perception area, then it's the tarpaka kapha vikriti, and that's how we can assess these clinically. So with this, we will stop at this level. The next part of the continuation of Kriya Kala will continue in the next session. So today we'll stop at this level.